My name is Christopher Baffa. I'm an ASC member, American Society of Cinematography, since 2007. I work primarily in television, but I still do feature films. I would describe the role of the cinematographer as the primary force behind the visual elements, the photographic elements, of course, hence the title director of photography. But that entails not just the physical photography, but working with a director in terms of achieving what he or she envisions, working with production designer in terms of what their vision is and how to photograph sets and maybe even alter the way sets are built, working with production with respect to the needs with respect to personnel and equipment, and helping to arrange that in a way that's budgetarily friendly and balancing what we need with what they can afford. So there's a number of levels to the position that go beyond just photographic. My favorite is still the photographic because I love telling stories with light and cameras and different lenses and trying to create emotion and tone on set and a mood, but it's clearly a multi-pronged sort of approach, if that makes sense. I was lucky when I began in that I attended film school, which I think is a great way to go. It's not the only way to go, but I did attend film school. And upon getting out, I worked as a motion picture electrician. And that allowed me to meet people. And then I got in with Roger Corman shortly after that. I think I was only an electrician for 3 or 4 years. And then I got in with Roger Corman, who at the time was making several movies a year. And once you were in with the Corman world, you were able to photograph films. And it was a great place to almost have a second film school because you were able to try different things. And they had certain requirements, but it was pretty minimal. Things had to be, you had to be able to see people had to be in focus, but those are things that are usually good to have in photography. But you were able to try things, and you were able to shoot at the time film and take film through the printing phases and creating answer prints and color and working with a crew. And so that really was the thing that cemented my path, because it allowed me to do a number of features, which then led to larger projects and so on and so on. And it was something that was really exciting for me because I had always wanted to do cinematography. It's something that I had wanted to do since I was younger. Wasn't always sure that it was cinematography as much as filmmaking until I went to film school, and one of my film instructors said, "Your movies always look great," because we had to make 5 little Super 8 movies for one of the courses. And he said, "Your movies look great, but they don't make a lot of sense. Have you thought about being the director of photography instead of a director?" And I went, "No, I have not." And when I looked into what the director of photography was, having been artistic my whole life, and my parents were big art lovers, and growing up around paintings and trips to the museum, even when I was young and didn't appreciate it, I became enamored with it. And so I was able to connect creating images with telling stories, and as my instructor said, helping people tell stories rather than being the primary author with respect to directing. And my agents are always asking me, "Do you want to direct? Should we be putting you up for things?" And my response is no. I'm still trying to learn how to be a better cinematographer. I'm not interested in that. Maybe down the line at some point, but not right now. So I was very lucky the way I began, in that I kind of slid in with Roger Corman, and that provided that, as I said, what I consider to be kind of a second film school. I would say shoot whatever you can, no matter how small. I shot a lot of student films right after I graduated for fellow colleagues I had met in film school. Even though you're not getting paid, which is difficult, you're still photographing things. One of the most difficult things is to learn about the political system itself on a film set. And as we were just discussing, the role of the cinematographer and how that relates to a moment-to-moment basis, how you interact with the director, and then you turn around and how are you interacting with production and first ADs, huge, very important people on a film set. How do you interact with them, and what's that communication like, and what do they need from you to be effective in their job, and what can they do to help you, in your job? And so anytime you can shoot anything, no matter the size, you're getting some of that information, and you're learning how to do that, and it can be applied literally directly. Something you learn on a small student film, you can apply to a $100 million feature, because the conversation might be exactly the same. It just might be larger. One of the only regrets I have in moving up to director photography as quickly as I did is I began working for myself very quickly. And as I got to know different people in the industry, I feel as though if you can work as part of a crew, and I know that gets difficult because to go the union route necessarily takes a long time to make director of photography. But even if you only did it for a while, there's something to be said from being a cinematographer's crew and watching what he or she does throughout the day in a position that you don't have the pressure of having to make the ultimate decision. And I didn't have as much of that. I was the one learning, but then also making decisions and doing the best I could. And I, in all honesty, got fairly lucky most of the time. But I also made some blunders that it would have been nice to see someone else make and learn from. So that's another thing, is I would maybe try and get into, camera interning. I know it's become difficult nowadays with insurance and things, and some of the reasons that have become problematic, in my humble opinion. I think that's important, to try and get some knowledge when you're not under the pressure of being in the hot seat. But I say that at the same time as I say, get yourself in that hot seat as well, whenever you can. I think lastly, my biggest advice is see whatever you can see anything. You don't have to go to film school. Nowadays we can purchase movies, on Apple TV, and you can see Citizen Kane in your own home, and you can see what Greg Toland did with light and camera angles, and you can study these legendary movies for their cinematography, and you can determine what it is that you respond to and want to emulate, or things that you don't care for, and I want to stay away from that. And that can be as powerful an education as anything. And I don't know that that's always appreciated on that level. I speak at a lot of film schools, and sometimes I run into people that say, I'm not interested in the old stuff. It's like, well, the old stuff might be an idea that you take and then expand on. You don't have to do exactly what they did. You might have better equipment than they did. If it's 50, 60, 80 years old, you might have more at your disposal to do what they were trying to do more effectively. But sometimes you look at older projects, and the things that they did with the limits they had are incredible. So it's a great place to start. It's a great place to learn about what others have done that worked, because sometimes that's a very important skill to have, is to be able to fall back on something when you are a little stuck and go, wait a minute, I saw this once in a similar scene, I'm going to do something like that. And it gives you a place to start. Those are the things I would say to somebody up and coming. And also, perseverance is a huge thing. It's a difficult industry. It's a competitive industry, but those, I think, that are really passionate about it and hang in there, I think are rewarded. I'm an old believer in good old-fashioned work ethic and being a good person. There's a lot of emphasis on that. The Me Too movement, I think, has been a great thing for Hollywood. People are more respectful. Whether they're being forced to or not is irrelevant. At least sets are a little more respectful. You can't just say what you want. You can't just treat part of your crew, if you're a cinematographer, how you want. You can't talk to a producer however you want. And that's kind of a good thing. So I think that's an element too that I think is sometimes overlooked. Your talent is one thing, but when it comes to working and being hired, your personality is equally as important, if not more so. If it's down to you and somebody else, and your work is very similar, they're going to be looking for anything else that takes somebody above the other. And if they have a meeting with you that they really enjoyed, you're going to be the one. I think the most important skills for a cinematographer are certainly communication. If you're about to sit down and do a painting, you're by yourself, and you can choose colors, and you can put the paint however you'd like it to be. Still photography is very similar. You can put a camera up by a stream and realize, I want to be 10 feet over, and you can move it over, and you can sit there and wait while you're reading a book for the exact right time of light. When you're doing a television show or a motion picture, you're at the disposal of people implementing your vision or helping you to implement your vision. And so therefore, what you see in your mind, or what you want to project as the image you're creating, you have to be able to communicate to people so they know what to do. They know where to put that light. They know how to set up the camera. Or it might be you trying to understand what a director wants. And so you have to be able to communicate with him or her with respect to asking the right questions. And, let me get this right. So you want to be here, and don't you think it'd be more effective if we were here? And then they go, oh yeah, that's better. Or no, I want to be where you first said, or whatever it might be. It's the ability to communicate, which I think is so important just in life. But on a film set, it's literally vital, because there's possibly hundreds of people that are waiting to hear what it is you want to do. And that's exciting, but it can also be terrifying. And so you have to be able to communicate. I think patience is a big one. The pressure of film sets is increased over the years. We have less time and sometimes even less money to try and do work that's of the same quality as the year before. And there's some amazing work being done out there. So there's always this sense of, okay, I have to go quicker, but I have to be better. And that can be nerve-wracking. And so sometimes when you're waiting for something, again, I may ask for a certain light to go up somewhere, and I'm not setting up that light. There's a team of people who are working together to bring power and a stand and set it up and get it powered up and aim it. And sometimes that takes a minute. And so you can't be one of those people that's like, where's that light? You know, like it was in the old days. Not on every set, but I hear horror stories, and I saw some things when I was, you know, working early in my career that were like, wait a minute, are we really going to yell at each other? That's not cool. And I don't like to treat my crew like that. I never have. I learned from my father, who was a very powerful man, you know, lead by respect, never intimidation. And I try and carry that into my role as a cinematographer. But it can be very difficult watching something happening while there are people going, hey, how much longer? Actors are asking, we got to go. We have 5 pages to do today or more. But you have to have that ability to kind of say, I understand, guys, they're almost ready, but this is important and we're going to give them the time to do it. Or have the frame of mind and the strength to say, guys, sorry, I got to go. We're not going to go with that light. Stop where you are. Make it safe. We're going to go ahead and shoot. Let's go. And that's also, you know, another skill I would say to have is having that strength to understand that you need the time you need, but you don't always get the time you need. And it's more important that the director is getting what he or she needs with respect to performance, and the producers are getting what they need, and you're getting enough pieces for the editor to put together. And there's a bigger picture beyond just your lighting. And that can be difficult when you're starting out. But I think as you develop as a cinematographer, you start to realize, and it's very painful. I'm not suggesting that it's fun or easy to do, but I've had to do it many times where I've said literally, guys, I appreciate the effort. I got to go. Maybe keep going in case there's a delay. And that sometimes has happened. You know, somebody says, hey, are we ready? And you go, almost. And they go, well, the actors are asking. And then, you know, I cut somebody off. I stop my crew. And then they say, yeah, well, the actress is on her way up. And I go, oh, well, then we have 2 more minutes. That's all we needed. So keep going, guys. Now it's a race between you and the actress. And sometimes you win. I think those primary things, communication, patience, strength to know when you've taken too much time, the ability to try and anticipate things, the ability to plan, the ability to think on your feet when the plan doesn't work. And that's a big one that I think is hard for young cinematographers when they have a great plan and it's down to every little detail, and they get there and it just is like, well, that's not going to work. Might be that it just wasn't the right plan. It might be that the sun's not cooperating. It might be that the set doesn't work the way you thought. You have to rethink. And so that ability to sort of be spontaneous, it might be an actor saying, hey, is it okay if I go to the window at this point? No, yeah, sure. And then, okay, oh, now we're seeing outside the window, guys, let's put a tree out there and block the trucks or whatever it is. Just being able to kind of have a nimble sense of improvisation. Filmmaking is a very fluid thing. It's organic. Project is its own thing, and it's going to cooperate with you sometimes like a pet. It's going to listen and come sometimes, and it's going to, like a cat, it's going to give you that look of, I have no interest in you right now, and walk down the hall. And you have to be able to deal with it when it's behaving and when it's not, because productions will do both. And that's one of the greatest things, is it keeps it really exciting. The biggest challenge is rectifying that vision that we've spoken of that you might have, or the thoughts you have, or the desires you might have for the way a certain scene is lit or ends up looking, and rectifying that with the reality of the scene when it doesn't work, similar to what we were just discussing. You come in, at least I do, I usually come in with preconceived notions, but I also want to make sure that I'm open to what's happening on the set. Sometimes it can be dangerous if you just stick with your preconceived notion, even if it all works great. But if you didn't watch the rehearsal and see the way the scene's being played, it might not fit emotionally in a weird way. Or you might have an idea that looks really great, but it's not in sync with the scene on a dramatic level or an emotional level. So I think it's one of the biggest challenges is rectifying the differences between what you preconceived and what you're actually looking at. You look at a rehearsal and you say, oh, wow, this is much more calm than I thought. So all this stuff I was going to do is going to be inappropriate. I think that's the artistic challenge. The bigger challenge in many respects is the element of schedule and budget. And, wow, the director now wants to see 3 of these big windows and I only have, or 4 of these big windows and I only have 3 big lights. So what can I do with that 4th window? And how much time will it take to get a 4th light, if you even have it, off the truck and brought to that other window that you didn't anticipate seeing? As I was referring to earlier, the schedules, certainly in episodic, have just been getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But the expectation remains the same. It's not like anybody's going, hey, we understand we're giving you less days, but we still want it to look like Game of Thrones. There is the reality that it still has to look as great as it can, but you are dealing with tighter schedules and oftentimes tighter budgets, and it's finding a way to make that work. So again, you're not imposing things onto production because they have their limits. They're not the bad guys. They just have a budget they have to meet. And so one of the responsibilities, as we talked about earlier, of a cinematographer is to work within that paradigm, not try and constantly be bashing up against it. But that might mean that your schedule is so tight that you've really got to be able to move and think on your feet. And there might be moments of disappointment, which goes back to the strength that I was talking about, where you have to say, you know what, in the time we have, I'm looking at the time now and we've got to go. And this was the best I could do in this location. I have to move on and live to fight another day. That's a challenge that always sort of hangs over, or something happens and you're delayed and now the sun's not where you thought it would be. Those are the challenges that happen many times a day, but it's almost as though there are challenges with a capital C and then there's challenges with a little c. The challenges are also what make the job so amazing and so fun, because sometimes when things do go exactly how you planned, there's almost I don't want to say a disappointment, because usually I'm thrilled when that happens, but there is a sense of, should there be some kind of resistance to this? Can there be some kind of, it almost is too good to be true. Whereas when you have to solve something, again, going back to that inorganic perspective, sometimes it's the production stating what it wants. And if you can sometimes discover that, you end up doing things that are better than you ever could have planned, because they are in sync with the actual nature of the beast in that moment, or that scene, or that thing that actor's doing that you didn't anticipate, that you say, okay, wait a minute, I don't know that my plan works now. And that's a challenge that can be very, very scary, but also really, really thrilling.